Hey class, I hope the semester's going well for you. Here we are and already in week number 2, and you've had an opportunity to start familiarizing yourself with the class, with our textbook. And I want to remind you that if you're having any troubles at all, any difficulties at all, please email me on the class email or at my Carl Albert email, which is mkwomack@carlalbert.edu. So chapter 2, we get into a very, very, very important subject, and that is the Constitution of the United States. And I think as you read and watch the videos, I'm hoping that you get a sense of what were some of the priorities of the framers of the Constitution. Keep in mind that as you read the history there in our textbook, that the framers of the Constitution had watched and endured a, a series of what they saw at least as abuses by the English king and parliament. And so, and you can read the Declaration of Independence, and that sort of gives you a list of their complaints. That's sort of a prosecution, if you will, of the English government. And so as we go into this new country in 1787 and we're writing a constitution, of course the Articles of Confederation were the very first was the very first form of legal government here in the United States. But in 1787, as it became really apparent that the Articles of Confederation were not going to be sufficient. In fact, many of our founding fathers were afraid that that the government here in America, that things were just going to fall apart. In particular, after Shays' Rebellion, that seemed to be the straw that broke the camel's back, if you will, that led to the Annapolis Convention, that led directly to the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia in the summer of 1787. So as you're reading the Constitution and how we got it, I think that it's important that you keep in mind that the framers of the Constitution really had two goals in mind. Number one, they wanted a representative government. They wanted a government that the people had a voice in. But number two, they wanted a limited government. And so they devised our Constitution in a way that the powers of the federal government would be very limited. Keep in mind, these are men and women who had endured what they saw as the tyranny of a king. And so they wanted to do everything they could to prevent any type of American aristocracy or American tyranny. So when they began to write the Constitution, they wanted a plan that would keep any one branch of the government from becoming tyrannical. So they devised a system. They divided the federal government into three branches. Now, I hope you've already taken the time to read your Constitution. If you haven't, please take time now to read your Constitution. So the Article 1 of the Constitution established the legislative branch. Article 2 established the executive branch. And then Article 3 of the Constitution established the federal judiciary, or the judicial branch. And those branches are all equal. They perform different functions within our government. And for our government, our Republican democracy, to function properly, all three branches have to do their job. So the founders or the framers of the Constitution included in the Constitution a system of checks and balances that would prevent any one branch of the government from becoming tyrannical. For instance, it's within the power of the president to enforce laws. That is, and carry out policy. That's the job, the overall job of the president. But he or she has the ability to check the power of the Supreme Court through the appointment of Supreme Court justices. So the Supreme Court is checked by the executive branch through that power. Um, they're not elected. They're not appointed by Congress. They are nominated by the president, and they are approved by Congress. The president has the power to check the powers of the legislative branch because the president has veto power. So a bill becomes law by being proposed in either the House or the Senate, and then being approved in both the House or Senate. But it's not law until the president actually signs his name to that law. So the president has the power to veto that law. But on the other hand, Congress also has the power to check the executive branch, and they can do that by overriding an executive veto. So the president can veto a bill, say, I'm not going to sign it, the bill won't become law. Congress can bring that bill back up again, pass that bill with 2/3 majority, and that bill becomes law without the president's signature. The legislative branch can check the judicial branch, even though the judicial branch has the right to of judicial review to declare laws legal or illegal, or better put, I should say, constitutional or unconstitutional. The legislative branch has the power to check the judicial branch by, number one, they can either approve or not approve presidential nominations to the Supreme Court. And secondly, they can check the actions of the judicial branch by proposing constitutional amendments. Right? So constitutional amendments can be proposed either by the states or by the American Congress. So they can actually check the judicial branch that way. Of course, the judicial branch, it can also check the executive branch by declaring its actions or policies unconstitutional. It can also check the legislative branch by declaring laws that Congress passes as being unconstitutional. And hopefully you'll read in your textbook about Marbury versus Madison, which established the right of the power of judicial review for the Supreme Court. So, as you can see by this system of checks and balances, the framers of the Constitution was very, very, very concerned that no one branch of the government could become tyrannical. They also wanted, along with that, they wanted to establish a strong national government. They wanted to establish or preserve, rather, the states as a governing entity. And they wanted to establish a government by popular consent. And again, they wanted a government that would not threaten liberty. And so those systems of checks and balances have worked well at times for the government to check the powers of a president. For instance, when you study Franklin Roosevelt in the 30s and 40s, and he instituted his New Deal program, the judicial branch checked him by declaring many of those programs unconstitutional. The legislative branch can also check the president and impeach the president. So as you can see, there are plenty of opportunities when all three branches of the government are working according to the Constitution. They have the power to check one another, and that keeps the government from infringing upon the rights of individuals. So in our discussion board this week, the discussion says one of the guiding principles of the Constitution is the separation of powers among the three branches of government. Why do you believe the Founding Fathers included the separation of powers in the Constitution? Does the federal government still operate by this principle? And give some specific examples to support your conclusion using your textbook and videos and any other sources that you may want to refer to. So, what purpose? What were the guiding principles? Why were the framers of the Constitution, James Madison being the primary author, the father of our Constitution, why were they so adamant that there be three separate branches, which is one, and does that principle still exist? Do we still, when you watch what the federal government is doing today, what are some examples that would either prove that the separation of powers in government still exists, and what are some examples that may indicate that we have some challenges in our government today in terms of one branch of the government becoming a little overbearing or exerting too much power? Again, make sure that you are writing clearly, make sure you are writing logically, give me specific examples. It's okay to give your opinion. In fact, these are essays, so you should give your opinion, but your opinion should be substantiated by accepted and established fact. And you can find those in academic sources such as your textbook. Again, if at any time you need me, please call me. And by the way, I would love for some feedback. Shoot me an email. Tell me what you like about the videos, what you don't like about the videos, what you would like to see included, and so forth and so on. Okay, I hope everything's going well, and I'll see you next week.